Before we get to the show, I want to let you know about the Deer IQ Advanced Whitetail Workshop, now taking registrations. If you sometimes struggle to find good deer, sometimes struggle to seal the deal, or are a good hunter already but need those critical last few pieces of the puzzle, our workshop's for you. This 2-day experience gives hunters the tools and mindsets needed to be consistent on the best deer where they hunt. Sign up below for a whitetail educational experience you won't forget. The Deer IQ Advanced Whitetail Workshop. And now, let's get to the show. Hi, and welcome to the Deer IQ podcast, where smart hunting begins. I'm Adam Lewis, and we're continuing our series on land and food strategies, how to best set up your land for whitetail success. In this episode, I'm back with Neil Hauger. He's a landman who specializes in improving hunting land and also selling hunting properties. In this episode, we look at the most beneficial improvements you can make to a property to quickly increase its value, its hunting value, and also its value to a potential buyer. And we have a free journal you can download and follow along with this episode and all our other ones that will really help you absorb all this high IQ info. Okay, so here are the top things to look for during this episode. What are the first things to do on a property, the low-hanging fruit, to make it increase in value quickly? Why should you document and inventory all land improvements, and how and what should you document? What does Neil say about building Booner Buck properties versus ones that produce 130-inch bucks? What's a regenerative food plot, and why does he think this is the way to go? What is so important about the story of your property, and why should you really think about telling that and building that? What's a steel buffalo, and how can this easily improve habitat? What is Neil's top tips for preparing a property to sell versus just keep and hunt? And there's a difference there. And there's a whole lot more in this episode, so let's get to it and up your deer IQ. Okay, I'm here with Neil Hauger for part 2 with him, and if you missed the first episode, I'll link it below. We talked about just how to get into private land. If you're thinking about it, not sure how to do it, we go over some general things in that first one with him. It's a real good episode, so check that out if you haven't. But today we're going to talk about, this is a new series, different series. We're going to talk about, once you have the land, right, what can you do, or if you already own land, what can you do as far as manipulating the land to get the most out of it? And this could be financially, both looking at financially and as an investment, but also for hunting, obviously, right? So what can we do as far as land manipulation and food strategies to make it a better property, right? So Neil, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Adam. Glad to be back.
Yep, great to have you. So let's jump right in here with the first question I have for you. And it is, what are the top things hunters should do first? Like when you acquire land that you can actually manipulate, right? And maybe sometimes this is leasing. Some people will let you do things leasing or permission. It's probably more for ownership, but if you have opportunity to, manipulate the land, what are the first things guys should be thinking about?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things to think about, but I'm gonna approach this from a point of view that you're trying to increase the value, and with the idea that you're going to turn it over, you're going to enjoy it for a few years, and then you're going to turn it over in 1 to 3 years and move on to the next piece and kind of move up, which kind of goes along with the theme that we have from the last podcast. So we're approaching this from a hunting and enjoyment standpoint, but we're kind of also coming at it from a financial wealth creation point of view, because I think they're a little bit different. So the first thing that I would do is if I can afford it, I would either hire a guy to create a plan, a management plan, or I would at least sit down with a piece of paper and a notebook, and I would map out my property and I would create my own plan. And the idea behind there is that when you do sell it, if you come to me and sell it, I can say this is a turnkey, highly managed. There's all these key words that say this is valued a little bit, I'm substantiating that value because there's some thought that's gone into this. So creating your plan would be the first thing. The second thing I would do is I would clean it up. And I like to find properties that are messy, that have junk piles, old buildings, whatever, snarf piles as I call them, just crap laying around. The dirtier, the better. Okay, that's where you make your greatest income improvements. You make the biggest changes, noticeable changes, and photograph and video that, so that when you put that property on the market eventually, if you're going to try to turn it over, you can show people this is what it started with and this is what it is now. An easy thing that everybody thinks about are food plots, water holes, tree stands, trail camera surveys, hero shots of deer that you've actually taken, but even better, time-stamped, more recent pictures of good buck, good turkey, whatever. I would start inventorying that stuff, and I'll start doing those changes. But if you want to take that to just a little bit better, higher level, and you want to separate yourself from the average agent, because everybody's doing this now. Everybody's buying these properties and flipping them, and Jeff Sturgis comes in, or Jake Islander, or Polk Whitetail Management, or Advanced Habitat Solutions, whatever, in my area. Make it organic. And if people follow me, if I can plug it, I talk a lot about regenerative food plotting. And it's about 10% of the market right now, but it's growing, and the interest is growing. And when you do that, I use vitalized seed, but you could use domain seed, you could use green cover seed, diverse mixes. I might have some monoculture food plots in the corners, but the story behind this is that I've got these regenerative food plots. I don't have fertilizers and sprays. I'm not throwing glyphosate and everything all over my property every year. It's cleaner, it's more beautiful, it's pollinators. It's a whole nother story that you can tell about your property when you market it. And that brings value.
Yeah, those are some key points there. And probably stuff a lot of guys don't think about is, you really got to think through a plan first, right? And I've done some of these for people. I do these for people, is really the mental strategy and planning it out on paper first, right? And looking at all aspects of these things and how this will affect this, and things like, how am I going to get in and out of this food plot? Like if I'm, for example, planning a food plot here, like that's what I want to do. Well, really look at that, right? Really look at it on a piece of paper. How is this actually going to work, right? How am I actually going to hunt this? How am I going to get in and out of here? How am I going to strategically do all this stuff to effectively use this land, right? And all that goes into a plan. So if you start just jumping in, and let me get your thoughts on this, but I would suggest possibly even that first year, like don't do anything major, right? Like really get to know what's going on there. How did the deer actually use the land before I start doing a bunch of big, crazy stuff that I can't undo. That's one thing that comes to my mind. But what are your thoughts on that, real quick?
Yeah, that is. I tell you what, I'm gonna give you a different thought on this.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. First, do nothing is a tactic that I've heard a lot of people say. Just hunt it, think about it, get the feel, because you will learn things about your property that you can't figure out unless you just are there. But you just added 2 or 3 years to your timeline. So if this is a lifelong property that you don't want to screw up, absolutely slow it down. But if you're following me and my teachings, and your goal is to create wealth because you want to get to the next property, can you really screw it up that bad? Probably not. And you're actually approaching this from, there's a timeline here and there's a sense of urgency. And if I have a plan I'm executing on it from a marketing standpoint, and it doesn't mean that it's just smoke and mirrors, but from a marketing standpoint, I can get you value out of that. and you don't have to wait a year. And I'm going to tell you, don't, because you're holding yourself back from the next property. I can move a property value $500 an acre very often, almost every single time, by creating this plan. And the plan, it could be as physically as writing it on a notebook and handing it to the guy. I've seen colored pencils, and guys get really crazy, to what I have. I just have it on Onyx, and I have this is the travel routes, dotted yellow line. This is a water hole. I marked a tree stand, camera sites, access, and then I just sit down with the guy and say, okay, on a southeast wind, you're coming up on this side. Western wind, you're coming in this route. So, and I'm probably pretty good on that. And there's a room for improvement. Absolutely. I had a field day out at my farm, and guys are like, why'd you put a stand there? I go, I knew you were going to say that. That's where I stuck it on the day one, and I just haven't moved it. But you're right. That stand needs to be over here. Did I wreck my property? No, I didn't. But, what I would say to a guy is that's what you can do. Because I got it to here. You could take it to here. There's room for improvement. So, again, that marketing sales, at getting people excited, there's things that you can do. I'm not perfect. It's not perfect. And I'm here to tell you, there is no one way that any of the top gurus that do land have cornered. There's not. They're all got their way of doing it. And the more I talk to them, they all have their different philosophies. And sometimes they're even badgering each other, like, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yep.
Not true.
Yeah.
So you can't wreck it. It'll heal itself.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it, right? What are your goals? Like, what is your going into it? And that gets back to what we talked about on the last podcast, is what are your goals and your timelines, right? Is this your forever property, or is this, like you're saying, we're looking at this as kind of a flipping type thing, right? And so, you definitely have a different timeline there. If that is your goal. What are some? Let's keep talking about that here, because I thought that was interesting. As you look at land, and you talk about the cleanup part, right? Like, a lot of guys, I think that turns them off, right? Like, I see this stuff I got to clean up here, but you're basically saying that is the cheapest thing and cheapest way to improve the land, right? Like, that's just sweat equity type stuff. I can clean up this, clean up that, and that gives you the most value. Talk about that a little bit more. Like, what type of things exactly go into that?
Yeah. Well, let me back up a little bit. So the first thing is like, oh yeah, it costs money to do that. I'm like, of course it does. I mean, it takes some money to make some money unless somebody gives it to you. But a skid steer with a grapple and a 20-yard dumpster is probably for one day skid steer work, $1,500, give or take. And a dumpster, 20-yard dumpster, is about $450 to $600. So consider it $2,000, and you would be amazed at the amount of work that you can do in a day with a skid steer. And I find that a lot of people that buy these properties or come to me, they don't really have a concept of what it costs to do. And so if it's just a matter of, I call them snarf piles, creating piles of junk and sticking it in a dumpster, or scooping it up and dumping it in a dumpster, man, you could do a lot of work for $1,000 a day, $1,200, $1,500, and you'll be amazed at what you can do. Then you can have a guy come through if he's got a skid steer attachment, or you could go rent one at the local, store for $300 a day, trailer it up there, and go mow some trails and open up some food plots on day one. Day two, bring your disc or your ATV or just spray it with glyphosate if you want to do that. I mean, it depends on what you're dealing with. And then you created a story about that property, and I'll guarantee you just made $500 an acre because you did that stuff. Maybe more. I would say, like trails, it's about for every dollar you spend, it's about a $3 to $5 increase. So you spend $5,000 on trails because it took a guy 2 days. You just increased the value by $15,000. I mean, you tripled your money. So those are some simple things you can do. I had a thought I was going to say, a lot of guys, they get kind of in their head about what's behind you right here, these bucks up there. And I tell people this a lot. I go, stop. I want those too. Okay. Everybody wants that. But do you really need Boone and Crockett here to make some money on this property and move up to the next one? No, it's not perfect. It can be done fairly inexpensively. And, next year you got 120-inch bucks that grew by 28 inches, and now they're 130 to 140-inch bucks. And you can market a property and you can get trail camera surveys and you can sell that property, because there's hardly any guys out there that don't want to shoot 130-inch class bucks. I'll guarantee you. I make my living selling land that has 130-inch bucks. Now, the guys on Facebook that are watching you do this are beating you up. Yeah, let's see the bucks. Let's see the deer you killed. Filter that out. Keep moving forward. Trail cameras, food plots, trails, 130-inch bucks, a couple of them that are recent will sell a property all day long. And then they'll beat you up about it. And you got to filter out the noise of the guys that are never going to do this, because they're asking themselves, how can I do this? How can I afford this? How can I do this? It's like impossible. No, how can I do this? And then you're that guy that executes. But don't get caught up in those big bucks that you see behind you, because that's not necessary. It's not even possible in a lot of areas. But you could create a nice looking property by doing the things we talked about, and there's plenty of buyers that will buy it. So you don't have to have it knock it out of the park with Boone and Crockett bucks to do what we're talking about.
Yeah, there's some good points there. I think a lot of people get hung up on, and I think this is the selling point. I'm not going to mention any names here, but this is the selling point of a lot of land managers, is the 200-inch bucks, right? And the reality is there's very few of those out there. They're very hard to grow, and most people are never going to shoot one, right? So
yes.
It's how to, for your particular area, and I'm here in Michigan, I'm going to have different goals than in Wisconsin, than in Iowa, than in Kentucky, wherever, right? A lot of it is the regional area, and you can make some improvements to that, right? There's genetics involved, there's nutrition, there's all this stuff, right? There's hunting pressure in the area, so much stuff that plays into what you can actually get and grow on your property, right? So it's keeping it realistic is one thing I think is really important. And to your point, let's get back to, you talked about the organic stuff. Okay, if you like this episode so far, please do me a couple things. First, give this a like and follow if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're just listening on a podcast platform, rate it and give it a review. And share it with a friend who may benefit. These things really help the channel grow and are greatly appreciated. And here is the high IQ moment. How many times have you wondered if your land is living up to its true potential? Have you ever wondered if how you hunt, your hunting strategies, is hurting your chances at taking a good buck on your property? The fact is, the number one enemy of most hunters reaching their goals is not the neighbors or the DNR, but is us, it's ourselves. Coming up with a good plan for the land and how you hunt it is a vital key to see improvements and the success you want as a whitetail hunter. Just start the analysis process and get it down on paper. And here's a huge tip. Do everything through the eyes of a mature deer, not yours. Look at everything through the lens of a wild animal that's desperately trying to stay alive and does not tolerate being hunted. If you will plan with this in mind, your hunting outcomes will be much better. And getting a professional hand is not a bad idea either. That's high IQ and something to think about. And I have a free resource for you which fits with this series on land and food strategies. It's the Land Management Starter Kit, which goes through the 4 big questions every land manager must ask to set up their property for success. That will help you get off on the right foot, which is super important, or help you get back on the right track for whitetail success, managing your specific property. All right, and now back to the podcast. To your point, let's get back to, you talked about the organic stuff, and this is also getting into the land management stuff and different people's philosophies, right? There's a lot out there that I see this, the monoculture, right? We do this, we do this, we do this, and we have these very segregated I guess, pieces in our property, and everybody's got their different philosophy, right? You talked about an organic approach, which to me is more, I think, like you said, I think that's coming in more, that's becoming more popular. Let's talk about that a little bit more, because I think that's pretty important. As guys jump into this, I think the trend has been to just go whole hog. You're using all these chemicals and stuff and all that, because that's kind of what's been marketed to us. We feel we have to do that because, oh, I need this huge tractor and this, drill planter and all these sprayers and stuff to just plant a food plot, right? So let's talk a little bit more about the organic approach. What is that? How does that contrast to what I just kind of described there?
Okay. I'm going to get a lot of questions, and I'm actually going to get some negative feedback when people see this, because what is organic? It's kind of overused term, and
right, yeah,
equipment and all that. You could start the process. And I sell vitalized seed. Okay, so I'm saying that, and that's what I use on my farm. You could use whatever seed you want. I use theirs. You could start small with a backpack sprayer, which costs you, I don't know even what they cost, $100, and get a jug of glyphosate with some 2,4-D and go out and spray a spot, kill it, and throw down some vitalized seeds, some carbon load in the fall. Very diverse mix, and probably not have to put anything on it other than that. Now, if you want a little bit better results, I would always recommend you get soil tests, and you might fertilize. And if you follow Grant Woods of Growing Deer TV, he'll say take whatever their recommendations for fertilizing and cut it in half on year one. Just put down half. And by year 3 or year 4, your fertilizers come down to the point where it's organic. You're not spraying anymore. You grow vitalized carbon load in the fall. In the spring, it greens up. By now, I just crimped and rolled mine. It was 6 feet tall. I planted the next round in it. For me, it was Nitro Boost, but you could choose whatever you want. Domain seed has great seed, whatever. And then I rolled it down. So I went out and I bought a roller crusher from Packer Max. You could ride across it with your ATV or your truck, whatever you have to do to lay it down. Take your soil test in the spring, add the fertilizer that they recommend, and then in the fall, plant the vitalize back in there. But in the fall, cut your fertilizer again in half on year 2. And you do that to the point by year 3, year 4, you're not fertilizing anymore, you're not spraying as nearly as much. And maybe you've accumulated some equipment because you're 4 years into this, but maybe you haven't. Your buddy has a brush mower, use his. Go rent a mower, do that kind of stuff. So the whole organic regenerative food plotting, I'm just going to tell you from my own experience, because I actually did it. It's expensive to do monoculture. I mean, pouring chemicals, deer grow, glyphosate, it was up to like $80 a gallon over COVID. It was ridiculous. I'm down to, I got 1 2.5 gallon jug of glyphosate, and only used it because I opened up a new field. I set it back. I burned it with some 2,4-D and glyphosate. I set it back. I planted my vitalized Nitro Boost, and I'm off and running. And I probably won't use it again for a number of years. So get off the chemicals, start small, don't break the bank, and you can make some major changes on a property that visually appeal to a lot of people if your goal is to turn over that property. And you separate yourself with your story, because these properties are sold with stories. They want to hear the story about the big buck. Well, what if you don't have big bucks? Well, go a different direction. There's a whole nother cohort of buyers that would love to have a 20-acre parcel that I can build my house on that's got some food plotting and some hunting potential, and it costs $100,000. You got 1 million buyers at that level. And you bought it at $60,000 and you sold it at $100,000, and you bought a bag of seed from me for $115, a backpack sprayer that you sprayed in a gallon of glyphosate, and you've got a turnkey upgraded property, right? That's how you do it.
Yeah, there's because, again, someone from the outside, and part of this is education, right? Like, who are you getting educated by? Are you really, really diving into that before you start investing in some of the stuff? Because a lot of maybe the thoughts from the outside is, oh, I got to have this huge tractor, so that's an expense, right? I got to have this, this, and this, and you don't really, right? It's kind of turned into this thing. I feel that, you feel like this farmer. I got to have all the farm equipment. Well, you don't really, right? You really don't.
Right.
And I do some of this in my backyard. I have a few acres that I play around with, and yeah, it's not perfect, right? At least for what I'm doing. I know I can make some improvements, but you get results, right? And you don't need to spend a ton of money. And another thing that I don't understand as far as this philosophy is the monoculture stuff, right? Like, so I understand some of the benefits of, let's say, for example, switchgrass, right? Okay, I put some switchgrass in, maybe it's a screening, maybe it's bedding. But in that, I don't see a lot of benefit as far as food, right? Like how much food value is in switchgrass, especially for whitetail. I don't know if there's any at all, not much. But what if you diversify that, right? And that's kind of what I think you're talking about, and you can correct me or talk to that more. But for example, in my backyard, for where I'm at, I got a few acres. It's got a ton of stuff in there. It's got autumn olive, which some people say is invasive, but its structure, its cover, it's food for different animals. I have a lot of goldenrod, different weeds and things. I do have some switchgrass in there, but not much. Like I've got all these different things that hold deer, but they also are eating it at the same time. It just seems like, and it's better for other animals too. I got a lot of pheasants back there, rabbits, you name it, right? It just seems like this more. Why would I go and kill all that if it's already a great food source? It's got bedding and cover. Why would I do that and just plant this monoculture? What are your thoughts on that?
I found on my farm, the less I do myself, the better my habitat got. So like I have a disc, I call it my steel buffalo. If you go listen to Grant Woods and the whole buffalo story, how they would go across the ground and rip it apart with their hooves, and they'd urinate and salivate and defecate, and they'd eat a little bit and then they move on. Well, my steel buffalo is my disc, and I've got areas on my farm where I stopped planting, and I just ran my disc through it every year and in the fall, or maybe every a couple of years, and it's just exploding in wildflowers and forbs, and the diversity from that seed bank that was already there went crazy. And I might add fire into that, and sometimes I might even throw some glyphosate. I might do that. I could do that. I haven't, because I don't like glyphosate, so I'm trying not to. But I planted that a couple of years ago, 4 years ago. It was planted, and now I've let it go fallow, and it turned out to be some great habitat. The fawns are in there. It creates that visual edge that people like, some visualness. If you were at my field day that I had a couple of weeks ago, people are like, God, it's just beautiful. I actually had a guy message me yesterday, like, hey, that picture of your wildflowers, what seed mix was that? I want to do that on my farm. I'm like, that was the native seed bank. That was already there. I didn't do anything. I left it alone and I ran my disc over it. That's what I did. Yep. And he's like, oh, I go, but here's Northwoods whitetail seed. Here's green cover seed. Here's vitalized seed. If you want to plant seed, plant less. I don't, I start off like, I got 12 acres of food plots right now. And I can tell you that's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. But I started off with just an acre or less than that. I mean, little hidey hole food plots. I had a 2-wheel drive Honda Rancher, I think it was, that my dad bought. It was a piece of crap ATV 4-wheeler that I got, and I pulled a harrow out of a tooth harrow out of the ditch of a farmer. I gave him $50 for it. It was bent, but it had these little claws, and I would just drag that and drown in circles after I sprayed it, and then I'd throw down my seed. And I got some food plots and some full of weeds. It wasn't that good, but eventually I was able to get a tractor because my mother-in-law passed away, rest her soul, and she left me a tractor. So now I moved up to a 26 horsepower John Deere, and I bought a Fimco sprayer, and I started picking up pieces of equipment. But by no means, I mean, I could go out and afford a $100,000 tractor if my wife would let me, but you don't need it. I don't need it. I mean, and now I'm down to, I do have a nice gator because I bought it from my business. And I bought that because I bought and sold properties, kind of what we're talking about. And then I invested and got a little bit better equipment. And then I got a grain drill. And they're a sponsor of my show, which maybe that's another way, how to get sponsors and start a show. And he gave it to me, and I talk about it and I show it and I use it. So now I have a grain drill and I have a gator. So yeah, arguably, wow, you got all this equipment. Yeah, but I didn't start off with that. Right. Like I got to that over since 2004 when I bought my first property. And here we are in 2024, 20 years later. So it's easy to look at me and criticize me, but I didn't start off with that by any means. I started off with a backpack sprayer and a weed whip. That's what I did my first food plots with.
Yeah, and I think it's the same mentality that I've heard a lot of people, like, let's say, just getting into the workforce, right? You're in your early 20s and I'm just out of college and I expect to have a pay and all the stuff that, my 60-year-old, 70-year-old grandpa has. And it's like, no, it takes 50 years to get there. Let's start a little at a time. You're starting down here, and it's the same with, buying and manipulating and improving your land, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff, Neil. So as we kind of wrap this up here, let's say you're on the end of you want to sell, right? We've got the land, we've made these improvements, right? You're on maybe this plan to do some flipping type stuff. As far as selling, what should owners remember to help them with that process? And I guess just maybe your top one or two tips to just get the most for that end of the ownership part.
Okay, this is going against the grain of what a lot of people think, but this is the inside of the American landman's head. People that buy like order. Our eyes like lines. We like straight things. We like edges. So a deer, that's probably not the best. If I want better deer hunting on my property, I'm not mowing the edges up to the edge of the woods, because that's not what the deer want. I want a soft edge. I want a feathered edge. But I could tell you that a buyer, when I bring them to a property that is well manicured and perfect, and it's got these nice straight edges and trails that are beautiful, they right away, cha-ching, ooh, this is so pretty. So your approach is different maybe than if you're hunting it, but you're selling it now. Mm-hmm. And I get criticized about this a lot. It's like, you're all about the money. I'm like, I'm not. It's the goal. Like, you have to think in the terms of context. Like, what am I trying to achieve here? And if your goal is to make more money and move up and get a better property to someday, you don't have to sell it. You don't want to sell it. It's yours forever. Your kids go there. But if you're going to sell it, mow it, get straight lines, put a gate on the door on it. I have an ugly old rusty cattle gate that I have to pick up one side of it. Otherwise, it'll come off the little hooks that hold it in place. I need to replace that. I'm going to get a nice black wrought iron with a buck on it and call it Indian Creek Farm, and name your farm. Like, have a name, because you create a story and you've got inventory from your cameras and you've got a management plan, and you can go out there and you could say, on a southwest wind, you come in here, and a western wind, you come in here. Here's your approach. I created this bedding area over here by hinging and cutting and hacking and squirting. So I'm going to come here around on the edge on a south wind, and that's my bedding. And inside there, I've taken some domain seed and I made some food plot sidewalks and a water hole. On the south end, I got this big, beautiful nitro boost, carbon load, nitro boost. I created this organic field that I don't pour chemicals to anymore. Here's my soil test for every year since I bought this. You can see how my farm is getting better. And then my agent is Neil Hauger, and he's just a great guy. And he's going to give you this acre.com report that's going to show you historical imagery and soil fertility and vegetative health, and like this whole package. So if you put all those pieces together and you get the right person to sell wherever it is in your market, and you have a story to sell, that's how you get the best return on your investment. And then you start over and we do it again.
Yeah, good advice there. Just being able to show, I think the story is a great analogy, show what has happened to this land we took it from here to here. I think that's a pretty powerful thing to show, Neil. Well, thanks for coming on, Neil. Real quick, give us a little bit for listeners who, we talked about this the first time together, but where can they find you as far as you have a podcast? You also are obviously doing the land stuff. So tell us about that. Where can people find you?
The best place to find me to see what I'm doing is probably Facebook and Instagram. So Neil Hauger, Land Specialist, will get you my Facebook. I think I'm at Wisconsin Landman on Instagram. You can go to Whitetail Properties Real Estate, whitetailproperties.com, click on the Ages tab, type in Neil H, and you'll find me. And my podcast, thanks for letting me mention, is called The American Landman, Buying, Managing, and Selling American Land. And I have a YouTube channel by the same thing. So if you want to visually see me out on properties where I talk about this kind of stuff, those videos are helpful. Or just call me. I'd love to talk about this stuff, and I'm glad to help you out if I can.
Cool. Well, great having you on, Neil. Thanks again.
Yeah, Adam, I enjoyed it.
All right, here are your high IQ takeaways and challenges. Think about the top 3 things you can quickly and easily do to improve the value of your property. Write them down and then put a date on doing them sometime soon. Okay, next time we continue and talk about specific food and food plot tips to help you draw and hold more deer on your land. A huge factor in consistent success on great whitetail. You won't want to miss that, and I'll see you then.